그럼 전 외래가 있어서요. 자주 마주치네요. 간 수치 3,600이 얼마나 심각한 건지 알고 계시죠? 지금 황달 수치도 굉장히 높아요. 어서 보호자한테 연락하시죠.
What? Did I just predict that? I would write the best medical drama. Dr. Cha was released on the 15th of April, making it fresher than a Trump court case. On this channel, we've reacted to a lot of American medical dramas. Let's see how the Koreans do it. I've got no idea what to expect. Let's go.
이전에 관리 받으러 오라니까.
야, 너 그렇게 안 좋아?
아니, 얼굴도 누렇게 뜬 것 같고.
응? 피곤해서 그래. 요 며칠 몸이 안 좋아서.
Who needs enemies when you've got friends like that? From what I can tell, the one in the white coat is the director of a company called Beautiful Dermatology. Seems to be a private clinic. This is her non-medical friend who she's convincing to get beauty treatments because, I mean, how can you get through the day without 65 cc's of hyaluronic acid in the mouth flaps? I've just had a daughter, and as much as I love social media, I mean, I'm making a social media video right now, I worry about the ever more wild beauty standards that are impossible to meet without TikTok filters, Botox and plastic surgery. Let's not forget that our true value is in here, not out here.
일단 기미부터 정리하자. 가시죠. 차캔디 씨. 남들은 의사가 못 돼서 난린데 그 좋은 기술 냅두고 왜 집에서 살림만 하냐? 의사면 아깝지도 않아?
This dermatologist is really pushing her luck. Anyways, it seems like we found out who Dr. Cha is. It seems like they've got an interesting backstory. Apparently she's married, has 2 kids, and has been looking after them in the meantime. It reminds me of a study in 2018 by a guy called Henrik Klavan, which showed an explanation for the gender pay gap between men and women. After having their first child, women's earnings drop significantly, but for men, the same thing doesn't happen. It can almost be thought as a motherhood penalty, and what's even more interesting is that childless women have wages similar to men's earnings. This is really quite interesting because there have been many theories about why women are paid less than men. Some blame education, some blame discrimination, others say women choose fields that pay less. But the research says that it's motherhood that is the penalty. There are a few theories on why this might be the case. Some use an environmental explanation, saying that moms aren't offered certain opportunities because of the perception that they're the primary caregiver of a child. Others say it's because women have a stronger preference to spend time in childcare. Certain policies like splitting parental leave still haven't removed the gap either, with Denmark still having a 20% pay gap despite having that policy. Let's see what solutions the future will hold and if Dr. Cha has been impacted here too.
여기 누가 좀 도와주세요. 혹시 의사 안 계세요? 내가 의사인데. 이거 좀 고개 드세요.
Oh, I understand her hesitance to act here, being out of practice, especially since after you begin giving treatment, you form a doctor-patient relationship and are accountable for your actions after that point. I love how they've also done this part in a way that it doesn't take itself too seriously, but this patient's condition looks serious. She started by putting the jumper under his head, which extends the neck and opens the airways. To take that one step further, she could do a chin lift as an airway maneuver, just widening the space in the throat. It would be a good idea to get help at this point, although they are on a moving vehicle, so that makes it quite difficult. Also check his airway to see if he's choking on something, or maybe he's got allergies and he's got an EpiPen in his pocket. That could be useful for anaphylaxis. It's a tough situation to be stuck in for anyone, never mind being out of practice.
인투베이션. 119요. 정신 차려. 정신 차려요. 환자분. 아저씨 찾아.
의사시라고 들었는데 같이 가주실 수 있나요?
I love the way she's just slapping the life into him. I like how she took control, called 911, told the driver to stop, and then slapped the patient repetitively in the face. That'll fix him. Now you may be wondering, what on earth did she actually do? Anyone could have called 911 in this situation, but did they? Psychologists have mapped this effect well, and it's known as bystander apathy. It's what makes people stand by and allow someone to be robbed, harmed, or worse in public. It's rooted in the idea that each crowd member believes that someone else is taking action, even when they're not. This is called the diffusion of responsibility. To counteract this, as doctors, when we take charge of a situation, we need to allocate a task to a particular individual and say, you call 911 rather than saying, can someone call 911? Then that individual knows it's their responsibility. Also, when does a paramedic ask a doctor to step into an ambulance with them? They're highly trained professionals who are more than capable of stabilizing a patient and getting them to hospital. If she did get in, it would make for good television though. Very much enjoying this so far.
네, 제가 갈게요.
여기까지 전문입니다. 저도 같이 갈게요.
목이 부어서 에르메이가 잘 안 들어가는데요.
선생님.
맥박은 있으니 기관지하게 해야겠어요.
네.
Interesting, so this surgeon was walking by and saw that Dr. Cha was struggling, so decided to step in and give them some help. You may have heard the paramedics say LMA, which is a laryngeal mask airway, which is also known as eye gels as a brand name. Rather than going into the windpipe, it sits just above it. Now, regardless of eye gel or endotracheal tube, with a swollen airway, you need another option, and the surgical airway through the front of the neck has been the procedure of choice for almost 2 millennia. Now, they say tracheostomy, but in an emergency situation, a cricothyroidotomy is preferable, which is placed higher up in the neck, as you can see here. That's because in an emergency situation, it's easier to perform, has less bleeding, take less time than a tracheostomy, which goes under the cricoid cartilage. Let's see where they put their incision.
소독약 주세요.
선생님, 성공이요, 성공!
She sounds very surprised. And these sound effects are really amplified. Hard to eat potato chips after hearing that crunch. It did go by a bit too quickly to see the anatomy of where they placed the incision though. So we're not sure if it's a cricothyroidotomy or a trachea, but it doesn't matter. The patient's alive, that's the main thing. So far I've been trying to figure out this Dr. Cha character and she seems quite vulnerable and worried. Hopefully she grows in confidence throughout the series, and we heard earlier that things aren't too spicy in the bedroom between her and her husband, so maybe this knight in shining armor with floppy hair has taken her breath away by giving it back to the patient. This is starting to look a bit like Korean Grey's Anatomy.
본인이 의사라고 하셨다면서요? 그러시면 안 되죠. 비의료인이 의료 행위를 하는 거 불법이에요.
제가 의사가 맞긴 맞아요. 근데 의사일 그만둔 지 20년이 넘어서
Medicine is changing so quickly that even if you haven't practiced for 2 or 3 years, you can be very out of date. Her friend at the start mentioned that Dr. Cha has a medical license. That is incredibly unlikely. Almost all developed countries require ongoing revalidation to show continued competence in medicine to qualify for re-registration. In the UK, as a qualified doctor, you need to work 40 sessions per year to maintain competency, and that's checked annually in a meeting called an appraisal. So not quite on point here. It may seem a bit brutal that the surgeon here thought that she wasn't a doctor, but giving people a false sense of security that someone competent is there to manage the situation is very dangerous. Although she actually managed it pretty well until the ambulance.
어머니, 운동 다녀오세요?
백 원장은 잘 있어?
아우, 엄청 부럽죠. TV에도 나오고.
속이 허하니까 비행기 타고 떠돌면서 방황하는 거지.
Okay, so Director Baek is the lady who's running the dermatology clinic who gave Dr. Cha the treatment at the start. Seems like what's happening is Dr. Cha is starting to feel jealous of her life, wondering what she's achieved and if she's wasted her time. It's so easy to have thoughts like that comparing yourself to others. It stems from a place of competitiveness. We don't like seeing others do better than us, and so we've rationalized that by bringing attention to the cost of success. Why do you think so many people are interested in celebrity gossip? Elon Musk can't be rich and happy, because then how can we rationalize how we have less money if he's also happier? Alfred Adler, 19th century psychologist who was part of the Vienna Circle with the likes of Freud and Jung, offered a solution to this. He mentioned how all problems are interpersonal relationship problems and that the way we see the world should be as a community. Each person has their own tasks, playing their own roles as ends in themselves, which can't be compared to one another. It helps us to see others as comrades rather than enemies. This is needed as a prerequisite to develop a feeling of contribution, which Adler describes as happiness itself. If you'd like to learn more, then there is an excellent book called The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi, which explains Adler's philosophy. You can get it with a free trial of Audible using the link in the description below. Even signing up for a free trial helps the channel as it is an affiliate link.
이재훈이? 예, 아버지. 국이 왜 이래? 도대체 정신을 어디다 팔고 다니는 거야? 벌써 늙었어?
If you had to bet your life on one house where no more children will be made, it's this one. I understand being strict and holding yourselves to high standards, but there's a right way and a wrong way to give feedback. Yeah, the soup lacked salt. Instead of asking, why is the soup like this? You could say, is the soup different today? Slight difference, big change in messaging. What we say is only 10% of what others perceive. How we say it is the other 90%. Why do you think Groot can communicate so effectively with just 3 words?
I am Groot.
선생님 괜찮으세요? 나 응급실에 있다. 백화점에서 쓰러진 거 있지.
나 학회 포기하고 가야 될 정도야?
Should I cancel my conference? Should I cancel my conference? You're asking your wife to decide if her health is more important than your conference. Either go or don't go, but that's on you. Now it seems our prof is having an affair and that's why he hasn't been emotionally available at home. It reminds me of something the Buddha said in the story of Saraya. Men who commit adultery suffer hell for thousands of years after rebirth. Pretty brutal. Interestingly, most people argue the negative effects of adultery in terms of the damage to the partner being cheated on. What's even more interesting is the effects to the adulterer themselves. This is important because surveys from the last 2 decades show that 25% of men and 15% of women admitted to cheating on their spouse. You see, we all assign ourselves an identity by the internal monologue that we have with ourselves, the thoughts we have that narrate our day. Those thoughts can tell us that we're a kind or a helpful person, or they can tell us that we're lying and we're not worthy of trust or love. We slowly adapt to believe that inner monologue that we tell ourselves, and this new identity that an adulterer may give themselves isn't conducive to that of a good life. Now it seems like she was dizzy, suffering from syncope. That could be reflex mediated, orthostatic, neurogenic or cardiogenic. Apparently she looked a bit yellow, so could she have liver failure or a cancer of some sort? We need some more clues.
이 간 수치가 정상은 40 미만인데 지금 환자분께서는 3천이 넘었어요.
그럼 급성 간염인가요?
잘 아시네요.
응급실? 아, 나 이따가 스파 예약도 돼 있는데.
This is the mother-in-law. Seems like hepatitis might be the best thing that happened to Dr. Cha, since she realizes neither her husband or her mother-in-law care about her more than their conference or their spa to visit her in hospital. There's an old saying that from Richard Nixon that used to help me get through really tough shifts in the hospital. The finest steel has to endure the hottest fire. I'm still waiting to become that fine steel though, Nixon. Question for you smart people. What is the most common cause of hepatitis worldwide? Answers down below.
저기 여기 매점이 어디 있어요?
저기요, 여기서 이러면 안 되죠. 저거 다 미성년자라.
Oh, Dr. Cha, that was about as smooth as a paper cut. Also, do Korean hospitals really expect unwell patients to climb a few flights of stairs to get some grub? Even the NHS offers a sandwich. Anyways, it seems like she's run into the surgeon from the ambulance again. Would be hilarious if he ends up being her doctor now. To be fair, he's probably wondering if he has a stalker now, seeing her here again. That reminds me of when I was on ENT. I once had a female patient, late 20s, come to ED department with a bleed after a tonsillectomy. These bleeds can be fatal if they're not treated quickly, and I got there, soaked some adrenaline onto some gauze and held that onto her tonsillar bed after giving her some tranexamic acid through the vein to help stop the bleeding. I held that gauze there using a McGill's forceps, which thankfully I had in my emergency bag, arresting the bleed long enough to get her to theatre and cauterize the wound. Just as she was being wheeled into theatre, we called her fiance to let him know that she was being taken for an operation. She did well and was discharged, and then I thought that would be the last of it. 3 days later, she came in trying to find me in the outpatients clinic, and then another 2 times after that. Eventually, she found me on social media, which, I mean, I'm not exactly shy online, and then started DMing me saying that she had fallen in love. Thankfully, after I explained that I was not interested and it was against the medical code of ethics to start a relationship with patients, she backed off. As a doctor, it's very important not to take advantage of a position of power you have with your patients, especially when they are in a vulnerable position. Unfortunately, not all doctors deal with that situation in the same way.
그럼 전 외래가 있어서요. 자주 마주치네요. 간 수치 3,600이 얼마나 심각한 건지 알고 계시죠? 지금 황달 수치도 굉장히 높아요. 어서 보호자한테 연락하시죠.
What? Did I just predict that? I would write the best medical drama. A few things to talk about here. The doctor mentioned that the severity would be determined by how high the ALT is here and the liver profile in general. This is accurate in certain circumstances, but not necessarily this one. Like in 2005, Yuan and colleagues studied Asian patients with chronic hepatitis B infection and found that raised ALT is a predictive marker of complications. There is also a FIB4 score that's technically just for patients with chronic hepatitis B and C infection to predict their likelihood of developing cirrhosis. That takes into account platelets, AST, age, and ALT levels. But we end up using that to even patients that it wasn't originally tested for. And we also still have no idea what's causing our patient's symptoms, so you can hardly say that the ALT is a prognostic marker here. But what could be more valuable in a wider context could be the AST to ALT ratio, which are two different types of liver enzymes and how they relate to each other, which has been shown to predict colon cancer, sepsis, and partial stomach removal outcomes as well. Now, if you're enjoying this video and want access to some special channel perks, then check out the channel membership. Not only does it help me a lot, but it gives you access to things like being able to suggest the next series and episode that I react to, priority reply to comments, early access to new videos, entrance into raffles. For a limited time only, the first 30 members will get access into a raffle to win a one-on-one session with me to discuss a medical topic of your choice. We currently have 10 members, so there are 20 spots left. So make sure to press join down below so that you can secure your spot before they're gone. The earlier you join, the earlier I can react to your suggestions as well. Back to the video.
나 해준 그 약 어디서 쟀어? 그게 사다리래? 응, 그런 거 같아.
인식 공여자 검사 결과가 나왔는데요. 다행히 남편분 검사 결과가 괜찮아요.
What? This is getting very spicy. Well done, writers. So now our cheating husband is the only family member who's compatible enough to be able to donate his liver. Seems like Dr. Char's gone into full-on liver failure. So will he? We know how selfless he hasn't been thus far. And even though he cuts people open as a surgical professor all day, being on the other side of the knife doesn't sound like a good way to spend a Tuesday for him, I'm sure. Now, the liver transplant waiting list can vary hugely depending on how urgent the transplant is. Life-threatening patients can have a new liver available 30 days from listing, but some patients can wait up to 5 years for a transplant. I doubt she would have that long, and all of this is because of an innocent alternative medicine. You may say that this is TV and they're smearing the good name of alternative medicine, but a large 2017 study published in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute found that those who had been taking alternative medicine after being diagnosed with either breast or colorectal cancer were 5 times more likely to die during the study duration of 5.5 years. Other traditional medicines may interact with drugs, cause cardiac arrhythmias, or renal or hepatotoxicity, as we saw here. Natural isn't always best. Remember, our natural life expectancy in pre-industrial times was about 35 years old. Now, let's see if Prof is willing to go under the knife himself.
엄마 구걸하지 마. 그럼 누가 해주냐? 누가 네 목숨을 구걸해줘? 이 쓰레기 먹고 내 딸이 다 죽게 생겼어. 선생님.
여기서 뭐 하세요?
What a moving scene, and it's understandable that the mother feels so strongly to want to keep her child alive. It reminds me of a quote by Rob Liano. The sorrow we feel when we lose a loved one is the price we pay to have had them in our lives. Now, the Chinese medicine shop is feeling the sorrow too of lost inventory. There was a study published back in 2014 in the Journal of Clinical Translation Hepatology on Chinese herbal medicine-induced liver injury. It showed that 10,000 cases of drug-induced liver injury were reported between 2001 and 2010, and 20% of them were related to Chinese herbs. 20% of those then go on to have liver failure. The risks are definitely real with these unregulated medicines. The list that has caused the liver injury is very long as well, as you can see here. Examples for the reasons of toxicity could be poor quality product, misuse, overdose, or even drug interactions.
장기 공여자가 갑자기 마음을 바꾸는 경우도.
또 인턴 때 외과 지망했었거든요. 수술실 참 그립네요.
오랜만에 한번 가보실래요?
That is a lovely sentiment. Can she just divorce her husband and marry this guy already? If his heart is this big, then I'm sure he's got some spare liver too. Being a surgeon is actually a lot of fun. I did a stint of a year on cardiothoracic surgery when I opened chests for the coronary artery bypass and valve replacement operations. It's definitely not for everyone, especially since you're burning parts of fat to stop it bleeding and cutting through bone with a vertical saw with the heart directly underneath. You also have to make sure to saw the sternum perfectly in the middle in a straight line upwards. Veer off too far to one side, then it reduces the likelihood that it will heal properly, and there may not be enough space for the steel wires for closure as well. A lot of things to consider with much skill required. Although never ask a surgeon to treat low sodium though, that's what the medics are for apparently.
야, 아빠가 간이식해주면 안 돼?
진작에 결정을 했어야 했는데 면목 없습니다.
차정수님, 간이식 시작하겠습니다.
Yes, the husband finally agreed to give the transplant, but he really needed to be convinced, and in the end, what was the reason? Did he really do it because he wanted to help his wife, or was he actually just helping himself, preserving his image with his kids and his co-workers? What would they have said about him if he were the professor who saved all his patients but then let his wife die even though he had a chance to save her? He did a kind thing, but was it true altruism? Altruism meaning selfless concern for the well-being of others. And the true part meaning expecting nothing in return. Does true altruism even exist? Now that's a topic of significant debate in human psychology. That's because even if outwardly we're doing something good without expecting something in return, we still feel good about ourselves for doing it. Or if someone is religious, maybe their framework tells them that they'll be rewarded in another life. Or maybe someone's doing it for social status or honor. Believe it or not, there was a study in 2016 by Hubbard and colleagues that tried to discover if true altruism actually exists. It took participants between 18 and 67 years old and allowed them to watch money passively being given to either them or to charity, while monitoring their brain's reward center under functional MRI. Theoretically, the difference between neural activity with the money being transferred to them and it going to the charity should indicate a purely altruistic concern, as it would be the concern for others and the utility of the recipient that leads to the stimulation rather than the fact that they donated it. Researchers found that the difference in those neural activities had a direct proportionality with age and the current amount of charity given, or baseline concern for others. They named that the general benevolence factor and concluded that it was evidence for pure altruism. I'm not sure our husband would score highly on this imaging test. Can't wait to see Dr. Cha improve either way.
엄마 괜찮아?
What? Now she's got his liver, she's had a wake-up call, she wants to live the way she wants from now on. Nice plot twist to get back at her husband. What's he a professor in anyway? Heartbreak medicine? Fun series, I'd give it 8.5 out of 10 for entertainment, 6 out of 10 for accuracy, 6 out of 10 for diagnosis. Pretty good. Now it's my turn to diagnose you. Seems like you've got a medical reaction deficiency. Oh look, the cure's popping up right now. Go on, treat yourself. I'm Sarah Med, stay curious.